Von Köln bis Dresden, von Tübingen bis Kiel, Hunderttausende gehen in diesen Tagen in Deutschland auf die Straße, um Gesicht zu zeigen für unsere Demokratie und gegen Rechtsextremismus.
Ich rede nicht mehr von Integration, ich rede nur noch von Remigration.
Wer Deutscher werden will, muss sich ausdrücklich und dezidiert, explizit zur freiheitlich-demokratischen Grundordnung bekennen.
Ich versuche mir vorzustellen, wie es wohl den mehr als 20 Millionen Bürgerinnen und Bürgern geht, die eine Migrationsgeschichte haben.
Multikulturell ist multikriminell.
Bevölkerungsaustausch pur.
Ich sage es in aller Deutlichkeit und Härte. Rechtsextremisten greifen unsere Demokratie an.
Die stolze Staatsbürgerschaft soll verramscht werden an quasi alle, die sich 5 bis 2, 3 Jahre in Deutschland aufgehalten haben.
Die Zukunft unserer Demokratie hängt nicht von der Lautstärke ihrer Gegner ab, sondern von der Stärke derer, die die Demokratie verteidigen.
Der Gesetzentwurf ist damit angenommen. Vielen Dank.
The doors have been opened for dual nationality.
Und diese Botschaft besteht aus 2 Worten. Nie wieder.
Nie wieder!
Hi everyone, welcome back. It's crazy to think how time has flown and that it's actually been 7 months since I've talked about Germany's citizenship reform. This past summer, sometime around July, was when we all thought that this bill on dual citizenship was going to be decided in the German parliament. But then, without really much of an explanation, it was delayed. And delayed. And then in November of last year, we all thought, okay, finally, this is it. They're going to do the first reading in the Bundestag. And then quite literally at the last moment, it was pulled from the docket. And the period from mid-November to mid-January was extraordinarily contentious here in Germany. It really looked like this reform was just going to sit on a shelf. But then on Friday last week, they did it.
Abgegebene Stimmkarten waren 639 mit Ja. Der Gesetzentwurf ist damit angenommen. Vielen Dank.
Yeah, families like mine finally have a path towards dual citizenship here in Germany. And while I am for sure celebrating this opportunity, the road to getting here, especially over those last few months, has been pretty shocking as someone who isn't from here. But I think any real discussion about this law and what it means that ultimately we need to look back on the road that got us here. We need to understand how this new reform compares to existing citizenship regulations in other European countries. We also probably should dispel some myths about who this opportunity applies to, and ultimately talk about what comes next. And to start that story, we're gonna need to back up just a little bit.
Wir brauchen mehr denn je den Mut und den Zusammenhalt, den Europa immer gerade dann bewiesen hat, wenn es darauf ankam.
So for really the past decade or so, Germany has had pretty friendly policies towards expats, immigrants, migrants, and asylum seekers.
Wir haben so vieles geschafft, wir schaffen das.
Under the chancellorship of Angela Merkel, Germany opened its doors to a record number of newcomers, taking in more than 1 million refugees in 2015 alone. And Germany has consistently been a pretty sought-after country for foreigners and immigrants to move to look for work abroad. As of January 2022, there were 23.8 million non-EU citizens residing in the EU, representing 5.3% of the 27 nations bloc's 447 million inhabitants. However, at the end of 2021, approximately 5.7 million of those non-EU citizens had already been living in Germany for at least 10 years. The number of naturalizations in Germany in proportion to the number of non-citizens who have lived in Germany for at least 10 years is persistently low. In short, when you look across Europe, Germany, by comparison, had pretty low naturalization rates. Why? Well, for starters, Germany's citizenship and naturalization laws are comparatively restrictive amongst its peers. The fact of the matter is, the majority of EU countries allow dual citizenship. And in addition to requirements around language, employment, conduct, and integration, their current laws only ask that applicants have genuine ties to the country by living there for at least 5 years. In contrast, Germany found itself amongst a smaller cohort of other EU member states that did not allow dual citizenship for non-EU nationals. In other words, if you weren't from Europe, dual nationality was not a possibility for you in Germany. In addition, German law also generally required a minimum of 8 years of residence before naturalization would be possible for the majority of applicants. And these two things together resulted in millions of people who had been living in Germany for a very long time, had been paying taxes for years, had been a part of society for years, yet could not be fully functioning members of their community. They could not participate in their democratic society. And objectively, regardless of which side of the political spectrum that you happen to fall on, this was hurting Germany's pocketbooks. The last of the baby boomer generation, which makes up a major part of the current workforce, is expected to retire by 2035. And according to calculations by the Institute for Employment Research, a part of Germany's federal employment agency, the country needs a net balance of 400,000 immigrants to enter the country every single year to fill the gaps in the labor market. And rising numbers of immigrants are ultimately the solution if Germany wants to maintain or even increase its tax and spending policies. This includes social security systems and its pension programs. Slow growth in immigration means there's little to distribute, which in turn implies more fights between young and old, workers and businesses, taxpayers and the state, or savers and borrowers. But fast forward in time to when the current coalition came into power in 2021, it really looked like they would continue Merkel's pro-migrant policies. Both the Greens and the SPD are to the left of Merkel's Christian Democrats, and in their original manifestos, they didn't just promise to continue taking in significant numbers of migrants, but also pledged to push the EU frontier countries into ending their controversial pushback policies. However, by the time autumn rolled around this year, Chancellor Olaf Scholz's traffic light coalition pretty much looked like they took an about face, putting up new restrictions on migration and even pushing for more deportations. And don't get me wrong here, migrants and asylum seekers are a wholly different category than those who are potentially qualifying for citizenship within Germany. But any real discussion on German citizenship law has to talk about these things in tandem, because when talking about migration and asylum seekers, these talks are really a political thermometer for taking the temperature on how well received the expansion of citizenship would be. Because ultimately, both groups of people, whether skilled or unskilled, challenge what it means to be German, and who gets to be German, and who gets left behind. And these things are woven together, and you can hear it in the rhetoric being said both behind closed doors as well as openly in the Bundestag.
Und insbesondere die zu schnelle Einbürgerung muss gestoppt werden.
The proposal for who can qualify for German citizenship has brought up a lot of divisive feelings. And the whole idea of what it ultimately means to be well integrated feels pretty contentious again. But by October, this debate on who should or should not qualify for German citizenship reached a boiling point, in part because of a conflict that was happening 3,000 kilometers away on a completely different part of the globe.
We begin with the desperation in the Middle East that's seen no break from the brutal fighting and loss of life that has defined the Israel-Hamas conflict.
In the past, politicians from the CDU, who, by the way, were traditionally the biggest opponents of these reforms, would say things like, allowing dual nationality would allow Turkish nationals in particular to tear the country apart from within. Now, if you're not from Germany and you happen to be watching this video, you might be wondering why all of this matters. Well, to summarize decades of history succinctly, war and a booming economy had left West Germany and the rest of Northern Europe with a severe labor shortage. Between 1961 and 1973, just shy of 900,000 Turkish guest workers traveled to Germany. And decades later, with over 2.75 million people, Germans of Turkish descent today are the country's largest and most visible minority. Familiar faces in all walks of German life, from sport and science to music and film. But despite these significant contributions to Germany's economy, society, and culture, there was still a very real sentiment amongst many leading German politicians that those who come from traditionally Muslim countries just simply didn't belong, that they didn't hold German values, and that ultimately they weren't well integrated. And even at the more extreme end, there were implications that some of these groups that wished to gain German citizenship were linked to terrorist organizations or authoritarian leaders in their countries. So if you fast forward to the end of last year, Germany's history, modern migration, and conflict all sort of coalesced around this same conversation that was happening in tandem around citizenship reform. A sizable presence of those with a migration background attended many pro-Palestine gatherings in Germany. And in large, that's because there's a significant support for the Palestinian cause amongst the Turkish communities. Recently, there have been instances, such as what happened in Berlin's Neukölln district, which has a large Turkish population, where there were clashes with the police, as well as violence and anti-Semitic chants. But there have also been a lot of peaceful protests too. In fact, the vast majority of them are peaceful. However, I think you can probably see that the leap that some took here, in particular some members of the CDU party, who took these protests as a kind of canary in the coal mine and used these instances of anti-Semitism to call for a halt on Germany's reform of citizenship law altogether once again. But things got even more politically complicated in November. The Free Democrats, who are in the Stoplight Coalition and used to be staunch supporters of dual citizenship reform, changed course and echoed the position of the CDU, saying that they would no longer support the easing of the rules for qualifying for dual citizenship, or not at least of how they were currently drafted in the law. They basically said that there needed to be tougher rules and a tougher crackdown on anti-Semitism in particular. And here's the thing, I personally don't disagree with them. Hate and bigotry in any form is abhorrent. And given Germany's history with anti-Semitism, I can very much empathize with a government who wants to be very careful in making sure that those sentiments don't take root in this country again. I mean, listen, quite frankly, I come from a country where I wish our leadership would often be more thoughtful in how rhetoric, not just of what they say, but of what other people are saying that they support, has an impact on their communities and on how inclusive our communities can ultimately be. But it really should be underscored that those of us who wish to hold dual citizenship with Germany already have to undergo criminal background checks, and anti-Semitism is a hate crime in Germany, both on and offline. Germany already has laws in place that state that anyone who wants to be a German citizen has to respect the sovereignty of international states. And Existenzrecht, or the right of existence for Israel, is part of that. But discussions amongst some political leadership within Germany didn't simply just stop with concerns about anti-Semitism, but also tended to take it one step further and say that anyone who wants to have German citizenship should also hold quote-unquote German values. One example is the CDU Secretary General, Carsten Linnemann, who was very vocal within the CDU, calling for citizenship reforms to be stopped. He said that it had become clear that speaking German and gaining citizenship didn't lead to the appropriate level of integration into German society, but there has to be a line at some point where it goes too far. I mean, think about this tweet from an FDP politician in reverse. Could you imagine stripping away a Jewish German person's citizenship if they didn't agree to observe St. Martin's Day? No, of course not. That goes against everything we believe that a free democratic society should be, that gives you the freedom of religion and the freedom of belief. And all of this buildup and tension really came to a head at the start of 2024. It was leaked to the press in the beginning of January that senior members of the AfD discussed a quote-unquote master plan for the mass deportation of German asylum seekers and German citizens of foreign origin during a meeting late last year. This event sparked mass public outrage over the next days and weeks. Protests across the country took place where hundreds of thousands stood up for democracy and stood against hate. And so it was within this setting that Germany's drafted law for citizenship reform was finally put for its public reading and vote in the Bundestag. On Friday, January 19th, after a 45-minute heated debate over the 80-page law, members of the German Bundestag voted. 382 members voted in favor of passing the law, 234 against, and 23 abstained.
Der Gesetzentwurf ist damit angenommen.
And the next few steps from here are really kind of more of a formality. It will next move on to the Bundesrat, where it will be voted on by the 16 states. However, it has been said by Germany's interior minister that this is, again, more of a formality because they have actually drafted the law in such a way to where it will be passed. After that, the president of Germany, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, will sign it into law. And then the civil service personnel will implement it, which should probably be sometime around April. The new law will mean that people who have been a resident in Germany for just 5 years, who have passed a B1 language test and passed the naturalization test, will now be eligible for a German passport. And importantly, they will also be able to keep their original nationality and have dual citizenship. So for my family, this means that officially myself and my husband Jonathan can apply for German citizenship without having to renounce our American citizenship. Older people and children will also benefit from the new law. Once it's introduced, residents who are over the age of 67 will no longer have to prove their B1 level language skills and will not have to pass naturalization tests in order to obtain citizenship. The rules will also be relaxed for children born to non-German parents in the Federal Republic, who should soon be eligible for a passport if just one of their parents has been legally residing in Germany for 5 years when the child is born. Which now means that my oldest son, Jack, can officially join his younger brother, Theo, in holding dual citizenship in Germany and the United States. But if we back up and look at this reform, there are a few but very important things to remember that I find often get lost in the heat of this debate. The first is that multiple nationalities have already had a pathway to dual citizenship here in Germany. If you are from any other country in the EU, dual citizenship has always been a possibility for you. That's nothing new. But for non-EU citizens, on the other hand, like myself, we have been excluded. The regulations around dual citizenship disadvantaged people like me, my husband, and other citizens from the United States, Canada, Brazil, India, Australia, New Zealand, but also citizens from the Middle East or from Africa. And when you look back on this entire timeline and you listen to the reasons given for this somewhat arbitrary rule on who gets dual citizenship and who doesn't, it definitely, at least to me, sounds like those laws were kind of aimed at the two latter groups that I listed off.
Selbstverständlich kann es doppelte Staatsbürgerschaften geben, aber nicht generell. Wir müssen unterscheiden zwischen den Ländern, die bei uns befreundet sind, die uns nahestehen, bei denen wir keine ausländischen politischen Konflikte nach Deutschland hereintragen. Die meisten, die noch keine deutsche Staatsbürgerschaft beantragen, kommen aus der türkischen Community. Herzlich willkommen, jawohl. Und die meisten, die hier leben, wählen dann AKP und Erdogan bei ihren Wahlen. Sie tragen diese Konflikte zu uns in Land hinein.
2 minutes later.
Ich selbst habe keinen Einbürgerungsantrag stellen müssen. Ich habe aber auch die doppelte Staatsbürgerschaft. Ich bin diesem Land loyal gegenüber. Ich diene meinem Land als Abgeordnete. Sprechen Sie mir das ab, Herr Kollege Trom.
Frau Pollert, selbstverständlich nicht.
And so, on some level, this new law is just simply evening the playing field. and doesn't discriminate from one group to another. But it's also incredibly important to state that this new law does not separate Germany from its peers. One prominent opponent of this bill suggested that these reforms would cheapen German citizenship somehow. But respectfully, to say that would also to kind of imply that somehow that Swedish, British, Dutch, Portuguese, French citizenship is less valuable than German citizenship, because these countries already have a 5-year wait to citizenship. This new law simply just puts Germany on par with them. And last but not least, for those of you who just simply say that no one should hold dual nationality, quite frankly, I don't know what to tell you, other than that's just not the way the world works anymore. It's 2024, and dual citizenship is the norm. Over 75% of countries around the globe support dual citizenship in some way or fashion. Sticking to a single passport or a single residency is an inconvenient and undesirable proposition for many people. And if you want Germany to be a modern, desirable, and attractive place to work and live, this is the path forward. And speaking candidly here, I really am looking forward to the day where I can officially hold 2 passports, one from the US and one from Germany, because I mean, it sort of is a physical manifestation of this duality that I feel within my own life. I'm an American, I'm never going to be able to shake that, but Germany has been my home for 5.5 years now. It's where I went to school, it's where we built our home, it's where we're raising our sons. And I feel so proud and so excited for the opportunity to be a full member of my community and to participate fully in the community and society in this democratic institution that we have here in Germany. It really is an incredible honor. And I also wanted just to take this time to say thank you to all of you who have reached out over the last 10 days, sending us emails and messages and congratulations about this opportunity finally being passed by the German Bundestag. I know you know how much it has meant to us, and it really makes us feel so welcome. And yeah, just thank you so much for embracing us so wholeheartedly in this. I'm excited to be part of this community with you. But I know that, again, talks about citizenship bring up a lot of pretty strong emotions for a lot of people. And as long as we can keep the discourse civil and kind, I would love to hear from you on what you think about this new opportunity in Germany, and to let me know about what you've thought about these last few months, and if you felt apprehension or even just really curiosity on whether it was going to happen at all. I would love to hear from you down in the comment section below. And as always, if you enjoyed what you saw today, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And for more content from Type Ashton, hit that subscribe button. So I'll see you next Sunday. Tschüss!